I'm Lauren Pellegrino. I'm a Senior Research Associate here at CCRC. And we've had the great pleasure of working with Fred Bowen, Director of Academic Advising Systems at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, for several years. The university has been active in iPASS work, so integrated planning and advising for student success, funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It's been a multi-year project that enables institutions, both broad access 4-year as well as 2-year institutions, to implement advising redesign. And so UNCC has been very active over the recent years with advising redesign and has recently completed a randomized control trial for which we were evaluators. And Fred, if you can just tell us a little bit about what you do at UNCC and how some of that work has been going.
Thank you, Lauren. My role is actually a brand new role to the university. So Director for Academic Advising Systems kind of came with a lot of these technologies that advisors use, things like EAB products or Starfish or things like that, with early alert systems and notes and appointments and all those types of things. My role is kind of like a in-between between advising and administrator, and also kind of coordinating with IT. So I help kind of lead campaigns, outreaches, anything that the university kind of needs related to student success and advising.
Great. So it sounds like you can talk a lot of different languages across the institution.
It's definitely something I didn't expect that I was going to do start off in freshman year of college.
Sure. Okay, so Fred, if you could talk to us, just take us kind of back to sort of the beginning, the genesis of some of this work.
So because of the iPASS grant really allowed us to do this type of work, and having the recent technology we had just acquired, an early alert platform, and just kind of get the ball rolling. And it's been kind of like the wild, wild west out here with early alert systems. You know, a lot of these universities are deploying them, but you know, you get like thousands of alerts. Advisors still have a hard time figuring out, okay, what's important, what's not important, because you have a 4.0 student with one alert, then you have a 2.0 student with one alert. And so it's just a lot of confusion as far as like, you know, how can you make these types of things effective and efficient. So we wanted to focus on early alerts. We want to focus on time to degree. And then we wanted to also focus on, you know, degree planning, you know, as part of that type of project. So definitely having iPASS and working with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation really allowed us to be able to have resources at our disposal to be able to kind of move the needle much quicker.
So in thinking about in reflecting on some of the early phases of the work, what are some lessons that kind of pop up to you and come to mind that you think would be useful for folks kind of thinking about or starting some of this work?
Definitely, there are a lot of lessons to be learned, but I'm just going to focus on pretty much like my top 3 that I think that universities can really benefit from. I think obviously bringing everybody to the table, not just advisors and not just deans, but provosts, student feedback as well, just really bringing everyone that is going to be involved in these types of initiatives to the table to really talk about, okay, what do we want to do, how we want to do it, and how we know if it's going to work or not. The next thing will probably should be picking your target group. I do believe that pilots do really help. You do kind of want to start small because it's just a lot to take on. And so, but you have to pick the right group. So the third one is accountability. So accountability is that you have to be able to know if people are actually doing the work that you want them to do. Again, so you have to kind of send reminders to people, say, hey, you didn't do this yet, can you go ahead and do it? And that's really, you want to kind of get 100% compliance on your initiative. So make sure the faculty are doing the early alerts, making sure that the advisors have done the outreaches.
I'm going to add a fourth one on you, Fred, because I think the other really important thing that I've noticed, especially with you and with your team at UNCC, has been the importance of your role, of having somebody really own the work. So when you talk about accountability, it's you do a lot to ensure that, because acknowledging that advisors have so much on their plates, to try and make that a manageable process. And I just also want to point out too that one of the other roles that you that you do or the other things you do in your role is you really engage leadership at the institution, so that it doesn't become that side project, right?
Yeah, so definitely being in the in a office where you're right up under the associate provost who's in charge of undergraduate education, being in that unit, you do have it does carry a lot of weight.
So the other thing too, Fred, I wanted to mention is because your philosophy as an advisor has also evolved over time just in doing this work. Can you just briefly talk about that as well?
I think what has happened with iPASS was that I learned a lot more about that there's so many different things that's going on in students' lives. And that, really taking the time to not just chase after an early alert and saying, okay, you're missing class, go to class. Talk about why are you missing class? What is going on in your life? And not being not take it so personally when students don't tell you stuff or even if they kind of lie a little bit about why, oh, I am going to class, and then you see F's at the end of the semester, that kind of thing. Just not really taking that type of stuff so personally, kind of being more softer in your approach, kind of being more approachable. And I think, having that shape in philosophy has actually helped me to help my students become more responsive to me when I do send out those emails.
So it sounds like you more relationship based type of approach.
Very more relationship based. I mean, there's still a old part of me that still kind of has to kind of tell it like it is with a particular student. There is that time to where you've done enough of the soft approach. Now it's time to just, and every now and sometimes those students really appreciate it at that time, but just not it being like the first tool out of the toolbox that you're going to use at your disposal.
Can you talk a little about the student experience and how, I know you talked a lot about technology and, it sounds like there's been, your role has evolved and practice has changed. So can you talk a little about how the student experience has evolved over time since you've been doing some of this work?
I've been asking students for 7 years, what's their goals for their first semester? One goal. And it's always the same four: getting good grades, making new friends, getting involved, and find out what I want to do with a major and career. So those haven't really changed. What has changed is that our ability to be able to recognize those things and being able to accelerate that process maybe a little bit earlier or a little bit sooner. Getting students to be able to connect with other students online on a virtual experience earlier in the summer was one of the things that we try to do, rather than just waiting for them to come on campus for them to make those types of connections. Getting them to go ahead and do career exploration while they're sitting at home for the summer. There's that desert space that happens this summer between orientation and the first semester classes, to where they're used to hardly ever get any communication from the university, except just, can't wait to come on campus and do your shopping and all that type of stuff. But now we're asking them to do things, and it may not necessarily be an overwhelming majority of students are doing it, but a good portion of them are excited about going ahead and starting to learn about the college experience, because they still are nervous about college. And so, in a way, you could kind of leverage those types of emotions to get them to be very receptive to any sort of academic coaching you want to do, any sort of programs you want them to go ahead and get started in, as long as you align those with things that they care about in that moment.
Great. So finally, then, can you kind of describe sort of where things are today with the work and what some of the next frontiers are? And I know we certainly want to address the COVID crisis as well, and how that's kind of been probably might shift the direction that you all take in the short term. But just thinking about kind of what's next and how things are going.
So stemming from our iPASS work, we still are doing our campaign outreaches. So we're still doing returning at risk students. We're still doing early alerts at risk. We're still doing midterm at risk, and then we still do non-registered student campaigns. So I do kind of centralize who those students are. They're at the top of the risk, tag them, and then have the advisors be able to use the technology to actually outreach to those particular students. Trying to make it as easy for them as possible of identifying those students who are in the most need. So I do still that on the back end. And then we have seen significant reduction in our first year probation numbers. Now, again, I can't necessarily claim all the work on that from just campaigns. There are a lot of other things going on at the university, but that does kind of help create a lot more buy-in with faculty asking I'm still getting questions about why were we doing early alerts? Why I already sent an email, I already talked to my students personally. Why should I have to put it in this system as well? It's not just about a one-to-one relationship between the faculty member and the student. We could determine that 2 or more early alerts is actually predictive of a low outcome for the student at the end of the semester. So we're actually using that to identify students that are going to be at risk before midterms, because midterms could be too late for them to be able to resolve their situation. And so with COVID-19, we also did alerts this summer, and we followed up to be able to identify what was the struggles with our students from COVID when we went remote, and we made preparations for this fall to help better serve those students. And so hopefully we'll see good outcomes of students this fall, of not having as many students struggle and end up on probation at the end of their first semester.
Great. So you essentially leverage your early alert system to have really specific identifiers or tags, ways to figure out what's going on with students that's specific to this particular situation with moving to remote in the COVID crisis.
Yes, exactly. It really, we did do interviews, or we had someone do kind of like analysis of the data and interviews and gave us some feedback. And one of those feedback is that students would like some videos, and so I created a video this summer on something. We've got the Office of Academic Excellence are creating videos. So, again, people are kind of, not that videos wasn't a good idea anyway, but it kind of rises to the top when you see that kind of level of feedback of how important it really is, especially in a virtual environment.
That's great. Well, we certainly wish you, all the best, you and your UNCC colleagues. And thank you so much, Fred, for spending the time today. And you can read more about UNCC and 2 other colleges that participated in the randomized control trial here in this fall. We have the lessons learned from advising redesign at 3 institutions, should be released here in the next month or so. So thanks again, Fred, for being here. It's great to see you.
Thank you, Lauren. As I am glad to be here. So thanks again.